All right, so I got a bone to pick with this guy. I'm taking this dude down. The Poolshark, Battlefield 1, realism versus authenticity. I'm going to give you a piece of my extreme experience in realistic gaming and tell you why you're so wrong. And the reason you're wrong is because, I mean, you're actually right. Everything you said was right. Sorry, I just want, like, whenever everybody sees like a video of mine, I know they have like a pre-perceived idea of what it's going to be, and sometimes I just like to satisfy that, just to because I love thinking, like, whenever Blue Drake replies to something, they see like, oh god, Blue Drake made a video on this. No, god, no. So anyways, yeah, so Poolshark, he made a video talking about realism versus authenticity. It's a whole city of authent. And he's pretty much right. He's pretty much entirely right, with one exception. Well, and it's not, and here's the thing. His entire video is true, and there's a whole bunch of other videos talking about this as well. Like, there's a whole bunch of other people talking about, like, realism and how Battlefield 1 is unrealistic and stuff like that. And there's two sides, obviously, to it. There's the part that's like, we want realism, and then there's the other side, like, why did you ever expect realism in the first place? Which is the same goddamn battle that everybody comes at this from. I don't know why. I don't know why everybody comes at it from those two angles, because I've got a completely different angle. And I always tell people this. Everybody always says, like, oh, Blue Drake, you're like a realism tactical gamer. That's bullshit. I'm not at all. I am not at all. Because there is a difference between realism and gameplay. Big difference. Huge difference. I enjoy a specific kind of gameplay. I don't necessarily enjoy realism. And I think that's the case for a lot of other people as well. And everybody always confuses it with realism. Everybody always is like, I want this kind of gameplay. And they're like, well, you want a realistic shooter. And you're like, no, not really. When you look at Project Reality, I don't know why the fuck it has reality in the name of it. That's their goddamn decision. But Project Reality really isn't that realistic. Honestly, like, Arma is way more realistic than Project Reality, but people still play Project Reality because it does something that Arma doesn't do. You know, like, do people still play Arma 1? No, because Arma 3 is just a better version of Arma 1. If Arma was just a better version of Project Reality, everybody would just play Arma. But Project Reality, regardless of the fact that it has reality in the name of it, or even Squad, for instance, from a gameplay standpoint, are completely different. And this is something that I think we need to apply to Battlefield 1, because everybody getting mad about, oh man, World War 1, it's not going to do it realistically. I don't think a lot of people are upset that Battlefield 1 isn't realistic. That's not the thing that, at least, it's not something I'm disappointed about. I mean, I haven't even played the game yet, so I don't know what the hell it's going to be. But I've seen enough gameplay at this point to have an idea of what it is going to be. And the biggest problem that I think most people are having is that it's formulaic. It's not that it's not realistic. It's just not different. It's not different enough. And when Battlefield first announced World War I, that was kind of a situation where you saw horses and and bolt action rifles, and you immediately think of World War I as being a completely different kind of battlefield. And then when you actually play the game, and it still seems to adhere to the same battlefield formula, and the gameplay is still incredibly formulaic, and there's not much different. That's what is disappointing people. I think everybody thought, oh man, this is going to be such a completely different kind of game, because there's no way they're going to make World War I like Battlefield 3, is there? That's not possible. And then they do. And then we're like, wow, okay, so they literally just did the same thing with different stuff thrown in. Okay, that's frustrating. And that's the part that I think more people are getting frustrated with. I don't understand this whole realism versus not realism argument, or Battlefield 1 isn't like Arma. It's not, of course. It's not like Arma. But Battlefield 1 is so not different so far. That's the frustrating part, is that it's not different. And some people might say, oh man, yeah, well, it's a Battlefield game. That's what you would expect out of a Battlefield game. Well, like, is it? Like, is it really? Because when you look at other games, like, look at Rainbow Six, the series of Rainbow Six. Rainbow Six has taken so many twists and turns over its lifetime. Look at Ghost Recon. Not this Ghost Recon. Well, this was so much easier. Ghost Recon series? Can I do Ghost Recon series? Show me all the Ghost Recon games. Oh, there we go. Yeah. So the Ghost Recon series, same thing. Drastically different gameplay for each iteration. I mean, it adheres to some fundamental aspects, but it's so completely different. It's not formulaic. And Rainbow Six Siege is a vastly different game from its predecessor. It's not formulaic. It has some fundamental aspects that the game adheres to, but at the end of the day, it's not formulaic. And I think people like that. At least I like that. I like games that are different. I like development studios that take risks and try new things, and the Battlefield series is not known for that. And then when we see something like World War I, we're like, oh man, this is finally them taking risks. This is finally them trying to like think outside the box and to deliver a completely different kind of game in order to explore different avenues or potentially satisfy different audiences. And then they don't. And they do the exact same thing. It's kind of like Call of Duty. Call of Duty does the exact same thing. Like, it's the exact same game over and over and over again. And ironically, Battlefield is starting to try and compete with Call of Duty. Like, that's not a mistake. Everybody's saying like, oh, Activision is getting destroyed by Battlefield. Like, they want that to happen. They know exactly who their competitor is, and their competitor is a formulaic development studio that releases the exact same game with slight reskins every year. Like, and that's what they're going for. And it's a shame to see that. So when people say, oh, it's not realistic, I think that's them just saying like, oh, they're not using World War I as a way to pivot their gameplay into a new style. Like, not that it's necessarily realistic. Like, I would have loved to see more focus on trench warfare. And not realistic trench warfare, but just a creative way of incorporating that. Or, for instance, some people say like, oh man, the weapons, you need to have that variety in order to have it be a fun game. Is that true? Is that really true? Because there are some games out there that have a single weapon, and instead of that weapon just being like the equivalent of like a SWEP on Gary's mod, like the entire game revolves around that weapon, and there's so much more detail. That's what I was kind of hoping for. Like, maybe it wasn't going to be as much about the weapons. Maybe the melee combat was going to be really in-depth, and there was going to be like a really in-depth system of melee combat instead of it just being you walk up to somebody and hit them. You know, like maybe something like Mountain Blade or For Honor. Like, I don't know, but something different. That's what I think a lot of people were hoping for. And when you have people say like, oh, well, it's just a Battlefield game, so obviously there's going to be more automatic weapons, and obviously the weapons that were a crew weapon that had multiple people in order to fire, you're just going to use that like an assault rifle. People say that as if that's what we should have expected. I mean, that's the frustrating part, is we did expect that, and we were hoping to be surprised with something different, like some other form of some new form of a Battlefield that's interesting and a deviation from what we expected. That's what we wanted, and instead it's just the same thing. And it's not that the developers took creative license. It's not like, I mean, that's the biggest thing. Let me see if I can find some Battlefield 1 gameplay that I'm not going to get striked over. One gameplay. Can I find any Battlefield 1 gameplay that I'm not going to get striked over? Probably not. I don't know. Here we go. Broman, please just give me one. Give me one, please. Battlefield 1 official gameplay trailer. Yeah, all right. So, it's not that they took creative license with World War I. Everybody says that, like, oh, of course, you know, it wasn't gonna be exactly like World War I. It's that they took World War I and they took creative license not to do something different, not to do something interesting. They took creative license to literally just make World War I fit in the exact same mold as all of the other Battlefield games. Like, that's what people are frustrated over. Not that it's not realistic, not that it's not, you know, authentic or whatever, not that it has all of the not that you're gonna, everybody's like, oh man, would you really want to wait in like a truck driving to the front lines for 3 hours? Well, no. But we were expecting something other than just rehashed gameplay from the previous games. That's why I love Siege. That's honestly why I'm looking forward to Ghost Recon Wildlands, because even though it's kind of it's frustrating, because I actually really like Ghost Recon Wildlands. I know a lot of people are like, oh man, this game sucks, but it's a deviation. It's new. It's different. I play it and I'm like, oh, this is different. This is refreshing. It's like an open world version of Ghost Recon. That's really cool. I really like that. Or with Rainbow Six, it's like, oh man, as opposed to Rainbow Six Vegas, as opposed to having more of like a single player focused, you're controlling your guys, and then having the multiplayer just being like this frantic deathmatch. Rainbow Six Siege is this complete deviation from that. It's slower paced. It's not so slow paced that it's not interesting to the casual players, but it's something that I can get into. It's something that a different crowd can get into. They incorporate these completely different mechanics that are really satisfying, and just new and fun to explore. That's the biggest thing. They're just fun to explore, because they're different. And when you watch the actual Battlefield 1 gameplay, and it's the same thing. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. It's a new version of the same thing without really, like, seriously, like, that's why, because I have trouble, like, I have trouble trolling people, going back before, like, between trolling people and actually doing genuine critique, because I like trolling people because people overreact and they love, talking shit about me and stuff like that, and they want me to fit this very specific, like, mold of, like, a troll, and sometimes I like giving them that, because I'm like, you want a caricature of me? I'll give you a caricature of me, and then, like, you'll enjoy that caricature, and for some reason that will be my most viewed video that everybody shares around, because you want that. But when I do actual like critiques, like, look at this, like, riding on the back of a motorcycle with a machine gun, like, can we seriously just, I could go and find like 20 examples of this exact same thing in all the other Battlefield games. And that's, again, people are like, well, what else did you expect? I don't know, something different. That's the point. This is what I expected, and that's why it's disappointing. Like, I know that's kind of a catch-22, but Battlefield 1 so far is exactly what I expected it to be, and in that, I am disappointed. I mean, I would maybe love to play it again and stuff like that, but This looks like the Battlefield Bad Company trailer when they were all riding on the quad bikes and they were going around. Like, it's the same thing. It's literally the exact same thing. Maybe the biplanes will be a little bit different, but I don't really know. It still looks kind of roughly the same kind of gameplay. Like, it would have been really cool. For instance, War Thunder. War Thunder has a really cool mechanic for like blowing off wings and having and shooting the engine so it like putters out, and then you can kill people that way. And that's the thing. Like, some people are like, oh man, well, I mean, there's only so much you can do with a plane. It's like, is there? Is the only refreshing aspect of a game having multiple versions of that? Like, oh man, instead of having more in detail aircraft that are treated in a completely different way, we just need to have more versions of the same thing. Like, I don't think that's necessarily true. I'm not saying that the planes need to be like full-blown realism like in War Thunder, but at least something different. Like when Battlefield released the fully destructible environments, that was different. That was a huge deviation. That was really cool. And I feel like they haven't really done anything that fundamentally different for years and years. And you have stuff like this, which are, that's cool, and they're awesome set pieces, but is this really that different from like the building falling? Like, they have already shown Levolution. They've already shown, and the melee is just like the normal melee in the other Battlefield games, just with different things. It's just, I don't want to say the word reskin, because that's so cliche to say the word reskin right now. But it's frustrating that it's so similar. I'm interested to see the horses. Like, the biggest opportunities I thought for change in this game were the tanks, the trenches, the melee, and the horses. So far, the tanks have been specifically made to be exactly like the other tanks in the previous games. And again, that's the thing, when people say like, oh yeah, well, of course they want to take creative license in order to make the tanks different from how they would normally be in a realistic scenario. Yeah, but they don't make them different to be different. They use creative license to fit them into the mold of their formula, which is meh. And then same with the melee combat, like and the machine guns, you know, like these giant machine guns where normally you would take this machine gun and it would be like an emplacement. You know, normally you'd have this be an emplacement that wasn't very mobile, and people are like, "Oh, well, obviously they weren't going to have that. They were gonna take creative license to have it not be perfectly realistic." It's like, okay, I'm okay with them taking creative license, but taking creative license to make it be exactly the same, taking creative license to have it be exactly like the assault rifles in previous games, that's not creative license. You're just forcing a different what could potentially be an incredible canvas for deviation and new styles of gameplay. You're just taking it and fitting it into a mold, which is boring. It's boring. It's boring. And the because there could have been so many opportunities to change that. They could have explored an emplacement option, kind of like in Project Reality, which I bring up all the time because I play it all the time. You actually have emplacements that you can deploy. That's something that they could have done in this game without having it be fully realistic, but having it be a different style of gameplay where you actually have to like put the gun up on something or actually like lay down and use it in a certain way or something like that. Or having the tanks people were saying like, oh, well, the tanks shouldn't have been exactly how they were in World War One because they're so slow and it wouldn't have been fun. Well, really? How would that not have been fun? How could you have not have used creative license in order to take that tank and make it different, but not in a way that's exactly like the tanks from previous games? Like I can think of so many ways that you could have done that, like the AT-ATs in Battlefront, where you had the AT-AT moving up. You could have made it so there was a player-controlled tank that was like super, super slow, and everybody had to get in the tank and then move it to like a point. That would have been really, really cool, especially with trench warfare, where you're like using the tank to move up trenches and stuff like that. Just different, just things that are different. I could have seen using World War One more as a canvas for a completely different style of gameplay, and they just seem to play it way more safe than I was hoping they would play it. And again, I don't know. Repeating myself again, going back to the whole, what did you expect from a Battlefield game? Well, I expected exactly this. This is exactly what I expected. Exactly. I was hoping it wouldn't be that. And now it is, which is fine. It's whatever. But how many times are you going to be able to play the same game before it gets boring? Like, and that's the other thing. I think I take this a lot harder because some people are like, "Oh man, don't get all so uptight about it." Like, and as soon as I say this, everybody's going to get mad. But well, I'm not going to say it that way. I probably play video games more than anybody else that plays video games. As a YouTuber whose entire channel revolves around playing video games, I play these considerably more, which I think drastically changes my perception. Because where you'd have a normal player who only plays casually on weekends or whatever like that, you know, they don't care as much. They don't notice as much. I mean, they could probably play Battlefield 4 for like eternity because they don't play so much and be happy, but they don't notice these things. They don't notice the formula as much because their nose isn't forced to the grinder of it for eternity. But for people like me, which is actually a growing demographic of people that just play all the goddamn time, which is not entirely healthy, but unfortunately I am tied to this, because this is actually my primary source of income, which you'd think would be a great thing, and in some ways it is, but I wish I could have a form of income that made me go outside more so I could be healthier and not have to worry about my stats. I'm just tied to this chair just constantly like, what are my stats? What is my viewership? I can't leave. That's why I'm really, really excited about VR, so I can actually like move. Oh my god, please. But anyways, yeah, it's just every time I see anything that fits inside the formula that has become Battlefield, instead of being used as a pivot point to achieve new styles of gameplay that are interesting and new, is I don't know. And the other, you know what actually makes me really, really upset? is the single player campaigns for the Battlefield series. The single player campaigns make me really, really upset because I think since nobody cares about the single player campaigns as much, those actually do take a lot of like actual creative license, like doing actually different things. And frustratingly, even more so, they're actually more what I want from a multiplayer gameplay experience. Like when you play a single player game, I guarantee you in the single player experience for Battlefield 1, they're going to have a lot of the things that I'm talking about. They're going to have a vastly more they're going to use World War I as more of like a jumping point in order to create interesting gameplay experiences. Really, like really. In Battlefield 4, I remember playing the single player campaign and being like, why the fuck isn't multiplayer like this? Like, I was sitting there and I was like, this is so much better. Look at this. Like, the assets are so much more important. Like, when a helicopter flies overhead, like, your entire mind revolves around that helicopter. Like, when a helicopter starts coming at you and starts shooting at you, and you're like, oh my god, we've got to take out that helicopter, and it becomes like a 10-minute exchange, where that's like a major plot point that you have to destroy. Like, that's really cool. And I think some people are like, oh, well, that's not possible in other games. Dude, yes, it is. Yes, it is. It's totally possible in other games. Like, look at this. So I'm about to upload this video, but let's PR Splinter Cell 1. So here's an example of me playing Project Reality. And in Project Reality, not saying that it needs to be exactly a Project Reality, but here's like a completely different form of gameplay. So in this, I actually get dropped off by a helicopter. And the helicopter covers me, and my objective in this is to sneak into an enemy FOB, plant a demolition charge, blow the FOB, and then get out alive. And obviously, there's like 20 guys. There's like 20 guys. And this is honestly like, dude, seriously. So what's your face? Where are you? No, you're here. Poolshark, dude, for real. Like this, I don't know if you've played Project Reality or not, but if you're talking about fun gameplay, like this should be your shit, dude. Like you're gonna love this. You're gonna love this. Which is why a lot of my friends and stuff are military dudes that come home and they like love playing this. They're like, dude, this is my shit, because it's so much more social and it's so different. But I get dropped off on the beach by a helicopter, and while the helicopter is doing strafing runs in order to distract the ground forces, and I'm playing against all real players here. This is totally multiplayer, no AI at all. While the helicopter is distracting the ground forces from seeing me, I'm using that distraction to sneak up on their fob, and as you can see, like I get really close to these guys. Go full screen here. So there's an enemy right there. That's good. Keep them where that and I get closer and closer and closer to the point where I actually, so there's a bad guy right there, and he's walking past me. He doesn't see me at all. And then I actually walk up to a there's a bunch of dead bodies that are next to me. So there's a dead body right there. And what I do is I pull out my knife, so I actually look more like a dead body. And I have his kit there, so if I have to, I can swap kits and get an AK and like use his uniform in order to like maybe look a little different. And I pull out my knife and I sit here and I pretend to be a dead body. And then their entire patrol goes right past me, and they don't see me. And then I sneak the rest of my way up to the fob. I plant the charge. Charge going down on enemy fob. I blow it, and then at this point I hear a sniper up in the hills, and the sniper hears the explosion, and he comes to check it out. And I plant another TNT block on this vehicle. Pick up immediately. And then that's a time charge, so it blows up. And then I call for I call for the helicopter to come extract me. Pick up immediately north of my location. Shit. And now the sniper sees me, and the sniper's taking shots at me, so I have to dodge bullet fire in order to get away.
On the beach. Where we are. Guns overheated. Yeah, don't try to jump in the Huey. That's risky.
I need pickup right now. The sniper's coming for me. They come and pick me up, and I'm out of there. Hold it down, hold it down. All right, get out, get out. Mission accomplished. That was a multiplayer situation, and you know what should blow your mind even more? Do you know what this is? Do you know what game this is? This is Battlefield 2. This is a mod for Battlefield 2. So when people say like, oh, it's not possible, yes, it is. Yes, it is. It is totally possible to have this kind of experience in a Battlefield game. And back in the day, Battlefield used to allow mod support so we could create the experiences ourselves, but now they've taken that away from us, which is why I still play these archaic games that are from 10 years ago, because all of the new games not only lock out our ability to change the experience, but they're the same formula over and over again. Why can't we have these amazing experiences? Why can't we deviate from the norm and create new things? Why can't we? I mean, and we wanted Battlefield to allow us to do that with mod support, but they didn't. So now, luckily, we have things like Squad, and Squad is actually from the same developers as this game, and they're making it from scratch. But the amount of work that we've had to do in order to get to that point has just been ridiculous. And again, you know, people are saying like, oh, well, Battlefield needs to be Battlefield. I mean, not really, though. Like, why? Why? Look at other games. Look at how other games deviate from the norm. Look at how they explore different gameplay. And that's what people are disappointed about. And you're always going to have the hardcore people that want the exact same gameplay experience over and over and over and over again for an entire 10 years. But not everybody in the Battlefield community is like that. Some people want something else. And it's annoying when I play the single-player campaigns in Battlefield 4 and probably in Battlefield 1, and they're actually like this. They're actually like this. Like, you pull things off like this. You have experiences like this. It feels so much more similar to this. And they have the capability to do it. They just choose not to. They just choose not to. Because they're not taking creative license to be creative. They're taking creative license to force everything they touch to be formulaic. And that's the problem. It's not realism. This isn't realistic. This is not realistic at all. Are you crazy? Like, it's not. It has nothing to do with realism. It has everything to do with gameplay and taking chances to be different. Okay, that's it. With that said, thank you for your opinion, Poolshark. You were right on all of the points that you made. But I mean, my whole thing here is that it's just a completely different. Our perspective, I think, is completely different than what everybody thinks our perspective is. You should totally play Project Reality. I would tell you to play Project Reality, but you'll probably listen to it here. And by relation, Squad, even though hopefully Squad doesn't like bite the dust. And hopefully you can understand why people just want a new experience and want development studios to take more risks into being different instead of taking risks to be the same. Like, that's the thing. Like, they announced World War I and we're like, oh man, finally something different. And then you play it and you're like, it's the exact same thing. Fuck. Not only is this the exact same thing, but they've gone really far out of their way to make it the exact same thing. Like, that's the worst part. It's like, man, you had so many opportunities to have this not be the exact same thing, and then you did it anyways. That's meh. Okay. All right, that's it. Thanks for watching. Love you. Goodbye.